Now, Malaysia is walking a fine line in its trade talks with the US, trying to secure better terms while keeping regional ties strong and its economy diverse, even as US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer resists calls for product-specific tariff exemptions. To give you more on this insights on how Malaysia is managing this tricky trade balancing act, we speak to Karisma Putera Abd Rahman from Bait Al Amanah.
Jamieson Greer has emphasized a firm stance of, quote, no exclusions and no exemptions. However, we also know that the Trump administration as a whole has been compromising on certain areas. For example, certain pharmaceuticals have been exempt from reciprocal tariffs. And so from this, we can infer that there is some flexibility to their position. And furthermore, that we must not forget that earlier this month, Mr. Greer himself has framed the tariffs as a strategic tool to bring countries to the negotiating table rather than as purely punitive measures. He described the tariff as part of an America First trade policy aimed at creating leverage to secure fairer trade deals. Knowing this gives us some insight into their potential playbook. So for the Malaysian delegations meetings, they can choose to view it from an alternative angle here. One that is more in line with a blank slate where everything is up for negotiation or discussion rather than Malaysia having to sing for its supper. Therefore, Malaysia can take this opportunity to engage with the Trump administration to update our deal with the US, as the last time, if I'm correct, a formal round of discussions around trade were held in 2008. So I trust that PMX and our Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry are individuals with internationalist mindsets and economic expertise. Hence, I am fairly confident that our delegation has a solid opportunity to negotiate more favorable terms.
Karisma also highlights the active role civil society and industry players can take in shaping negotiation outcomes and protecting national interests. He outlines steps on how they can be more involved in the process and ensure their voices are heard and priorities addressed.
So, as it stands, Malaysia already invites business groups and sometimes NGOs into trade talks, but the process tends to be quite ad hoc, opaque, and KL-centric. As I understand it, industry representation is fairly strong, but civil society input is still relatively sporadic. For example, in the CPTPP process, groups such as the Third World Network and a few others complain of inadequate consultation and limited tax access. Furthermore, being an East Malaysian myself, Sabahan and Sarkian CSOs note a KL bias with few state-level dialogues accompanying discussions around deals such as RCEP. So when combined with the fact that draft chapters are shared only on a need-to-know basis with hand-picked stakeholders by MITI, it becomes difficult for civil society to have an input. And so for this to improve, we can take a page out of Canada and the European Free Trade Association, or EFTA. So, for example, Canada publishes their negotiating objectives fairly early. They invite written submissions and they post a what we heard report after each consultation. So this allows the government to have the space to perform mid-course corrections and for trust building to also occur. And for the latter, so for EFTA, so during their the FTA Malaysia Economic Partnership negotiations, the EFTA Secretariat published a plain language fact sheet after it, allowing for those with broader expertise and members of the general public to understand the matters being negotiated. So this allows for more people and representative organizations in civil society to advocate to relevant policymakers on what is important to people on the ground. So these are some of the changes that the government could potentially consider to make trade negotiations a more holistic process, and in the process of doing so, safeguard national interest.